We should return upstairs, Vincent suggested, his calm demeanor showing the first cracks of worry. It's not safe to be below ground level after nightfall. As they climbed back up the spiral staircase, Eleanor clutched the locket in her palm, its warmth now uncomfortable against her skin. The corridor leading back to the drawing room seemed longer than before, the shadows between wall sconces deeper, more impenetrable. "What happens at midnight?" she asked, directing her question to anyone willing to answer. "The veil thins completely," Dr. Morrow replied, his academic tone betrayed by the sweat beading on his forehead. "Based on previous cycles, phenomena will increase in intensity until—" A crash from somewhere upstairs interrupted him. The sound of breaking glass, followed by what Eleanor could only describe as a child's laughter, high and clear and utterly out of place in the silent manor. "They're awake early this year," Winifred murmured, clutching her cardigan around her shoulders. "Who is?" Eleanor demanded. Before anyone could answer, every light in the corridor went out simultaneously. Complete darkness enveloped them, broken only by the silver moonlight filtering through a distant window. In that faint illumination, Eleanor saw something move, a small figure at the end of the hallway, too short to be an adult, too still to be natural. Dr. Morrow fumbled in his pocket for a flashlight. When he finally switched it on, the corridor was empty. "To the drawing room," Vincent instructed, his voice tight. "Quickly now." Once back in the relative safety of the well-lit drawing room, Vincent locked the door behind them. The grandfather clock now read 10:30, though Eleanor was certain they'd spent less than 10 minutes in the basement and hallway. Time seemed to be slipping, stretching and compressing like taffy. "You owe me explanations," Eleanor insisted, placing the locket on a side table as if it burned her. "Real ones, not cryptic warnings about veils and cycles." Vincent exchanged glances with the others before nodding reluctantly. "The truth, then." Thomas Ravenwood didn't make his fortune in lumber alone. He discovered something in these woods, something ancient that promised him power and wealth beyond measure. A presence that would favor his bloodline so long as they provided it with what it needed. Which was devotion, Cassandra supplied. Sacrifice. The Ravenwoods served as its priests for generations. But Charlotte rebelled. She married James Thornfield, a spiritualist who recognized the darkness in her family legacy. They tried to seal what her father had opened, but they underestimated its hold on the land, and on their children. Winifred continued the narrative, her historian's precision making the fantastical sound factual. The 1918 influenza provided perfect cover. The Thornfield children didn't die of disease, they were taken by what lives in the walls. Charlotte and James fled, changing their name, hiding their surviving daughter. "Your grandmother. The manor has been seeking a return of the bloodline ever since," Dr. Morrow added. "The 1973 incident was an attempt to force a reunion. It partially succeeded." Eleanor felt sick. "The missing child. She was my mother." Vincent nodded grimly. "Margaret Thornfield. 5 years old when she was lured back to her ancestral home. The researchers found her in the North Tower, trying to reach something they couldn't see. When they attempted to remove her from the property, the entity reacted violently. But she survived," Eleanor whispered. "The entity protected her, yes. She was found wandering near the highway 3 days later, with no memory of what happened. She was adopted, grew up, had you, and then died in childbirth, never knowing her true heritage." Eleanor's journalist mind raced to process this information, to find the logical holes, the evidence that would disprove this elaborate fiction. But the locket on the table, the face so similar to her own, and the growing certainty in her bones that she belonged in this house all worked against rational dismissal. A series of rapid knocks sounded at the drawing room door, though Vincent had locked it from the inside. Everyone froze. "Don't answer it," Cassandra warned, her hands clutching her pendant. "It's not what it seems." The knocking ceased, replaced by the soft sound of crying, a child's sobs, heartbreaking in their authenticity. "Please," came a small voice from beyond the door. "I'm cold. Please let me in." Eleanor moved toward the door instinctively, motherly instinct overriding caution, but Dr. Morrow grabbed her arm. "That's how it begins," he hissed. "It uses your compassion against you." The crying stopped abruptly. In the silence that followed, Eleanor heard a soft thump, like a small body sliding down to sit against the outside of the door. "Eleanor," the child's voice called, no longer crying but eerily sing-song. "We've been waiting so long for you to come home." A small, pale hand slid under the door, reaching into the drawing room, far too far to belong to a natural anatomy. The fingers stretched, elongated, groping blindly across the floor toward Eleanor's feet. Before anyone could react, the grandfather clock struck 11. The hand withdrew instantly, and a collective sigh of relief filled the room. "1 hour until midnight," Vincent said grimly. "We must prepare." As Dr. Morrow and Winifred began moving furniture to create a circular space in the center of the room, Eleanor noticed a leather-bound journal that had fallen from one of the bookshelves during their hasty entry. It lay open to a page filled with handwriting she recognized immediately as similar to her own, the same distinctive loop to the Y's, the same slant to the T's. She picked it up, reading the faded ink. October 31st, 1918. "They are coming for us tonight. James believes his ritual will hold them back, but I've seen what lurks in the North Tower. It's grown too strong. If anyone finds this journal, know that the Ravenwood legacy is blood-soaked from its foundations. The sacrifices my father made, that his father made before him, all to feed what should never have been disturbed. I've hidden Josephine in the priest's hole behind the library fireplace. If we fail tonight, someone must take her far from this place before she becomes what I nearly became, a vessel for something ancient and hungry. The only way to end this is to break the bloodline or to complete the original pact. One Ravenwood must willingly give themselves to the threshold. Not taken, not tricked, but offered freely. The clock is striking midnight. They're in the walls now. God forgive us for what we've done." The journal ended there. Eleanor looked up to find Cassandra watching her with knowing eyes. "Now you understand," the medium said softly. "Why you're here. What you represent. A sacrifice?" Eleanor's voice shook. "Or a savior," Vincent corrected. "The choice, Miss Blackwood, will be entirely yours." The drawing room transformed into a fortress against the encroaching night. Dr. Morrow drew symbols in chalk across the doorway and windowsills, protective sigils he claimed were ancient defenses against what dwelled in the manor. Winifred spread old maps of the property across a table, marking locations where previous manifestations had been strongest. Cassandra sat cross-legged on the floor, eyes closed, lips moving in silent communion with forces only she could perceive. And Vincent watched Eleanor, his pale eyes never leaving her face as she absorbed the implications of Charlotte Ravenwood's journal. "You knew," Eleanor said finally, closing the leather-bound book with trembling fingers. "You knew what would happen when you invited me here." "I knew what could happen," Vincent corrected. "The cycle has returned every 50 years since Thomas Ravenwood first opened the door. Each time, the entity grows stronger, more desperate to fully cross the threshold. And you need a Ravenwood to, what? Close the door. Become a human sacrifice. To make the choice Charlotte couldn't bring herself to make," Vincent replied softly. "The bloodline opened the door. Only the bloodline can decide how it ends." Outside, the wind had risen to a howl that rattled the windows in their frames. Tree branches scraped against the glass like skeletal fingers seeking entry. The temperature in the room had dropped noticeably, Eleanor could see her breath misting in the air. "They're gathering strength," Dr. Morrow announced, stepping back from his completed chalk barrier. "The protective measures will hold until midnight, but after that." He left the sentence unfinished, his academic certainty faltering. Eleanor's journalistic instincts fought through her fear. If this has been happening every 50 years, why isn't Ravenwood Manor infamous? Why isn't it surrounded by ghost hunters and thrill-seekers every Halloween? Winifred looked up from her maps. The Ravenwood Trust has considerable resources and influence. Witnesses are paid for their silence. Records are altered. The 1973 incident was reported as a tragic accident, 3 researchers overcome by carbon monoxide from a faulty heating system. And the missing child? My mother? A regrettable case of a little girl wandering into the woods during the confusion. Winifred's tone was bitter. I tried to publish the truth once. My newspaper office burned to the ground the next day. No casualties, but the message was clear. The grandfather clock in the corner struck once, the sound unnaturally loud in the tense room. Eleanor glanced at it, 11:15. Time was slipping again, moving too quickly. What exactly lives here? Eleanor asked, struggling to maintain rational thought as the atmosphere grew heavier, more oppressive. You keep talking around it, but no one will name it. Dr. Morrow cleared his throat. Indigenous legends speak of a hunger that lived in these woods long before European settlement. The local tribes avoided this area entirely, called it the place of hollow voices. When Thomas Ravenwood began construction in 1887, workers reported hearing children's voices calling from the earth as they dug the foundation. Not children, Cassandra said, her eyes still closed. Never children. It just wears their faces because children inspire trust, protection, love. Her eyes snapped open suddenly, fixing on Eleanor with frightening intensity. It's listening to us right now. Learning. Adapting. As if in response to Cassandra's words, the electric lights flickered and died, plunging the room into darkness relieved only by the fire in the grate and Dr. Morrow's emergency flashlight. In the sudden shadow, the corners of the room seemed to deepen, to stretch into impossible spaces. I found something, Winifred called urgently, her flashlight illuminating a point on one of her maps. Look at the property boundaries from the original deed. The manor isn't built on a random spot in the forest, it's constructed precisely over a natural formation. See these elevation lines? They gathered around the table, peering at the yellowed survey map from 1886. The land beneath Ravenwood Manor formed a perfect spiral descending into the earth, a natural anomaly that couldn't possibly be coincidental. A vortex, Dr. Morrow breathed, professional excitement momentarily overriding his fear. A geological structure that could theoretically thin the barriers between dimensions. Thomas Ravenwood didn't choose this location by accident. No, came a voice from the doorway, Father knew exactly what he was doing. Eleanor whirled around. In the open doorway, the doorway Dr. Morrow had sealed with chalk sigils, stood an elderly woman in a nightgown of antique design. Her white hair hung loose around a face deeply lined with age, yet the eyes that stared back at Eleanor were unervingly youthful, and familiar. Josephine, Vincent whispered, his composure cracking for the first time. Impossible. You died in 1989. The old woman smiled, the expression not quite reaching her eyes. Did I? I don't recall dying. I only remember coming home, where I belong. She turned her gaze to Eleanor. My granddaughter. You have my eyes. Mother's eyes. The Ravenwood eyes. Eleanor backed away instinctively. You're not real. More real than you know. The figure that called itself Josephine stepped into the room, leaving wet footprints on the carpet despite the dry night outside. I've waited so long for another of our blood to return. The others, she gestured dismissively at Vincent and the rest, they're just caretakers. Guardians. They can never understand what it means to be a Ravenwood. Dr. Morrow moved forward, his scientific skepticism asserting itself. This is a manifestation, not Josephine Thornfield. Don't engage with it. The old woman laughed, the sound transforming midway into something higher, younger, a child's laugh that echoed too long in the confined space. Her form shimmered like heat rising from asphalt, her features melting and reforming into those of a young girl perhaps 5 years old, with dark curls and a white dress stained with what looked uncomfortably like soil. Is this better? The child asked, her voice sweet and clear. This is how your mother looked when she came to play with us. Before they took her away again. Eleanor felt her knees weaken. The child before her was the spitting image of her own baby pictures, the same pictures her adoptive parents had shown her, claiming they were of Eleanor herself as a toddler. Had they lied? Or had they been given photos of Margaret instead, part of the elaborate cover-up? What do you want? Eleanor managed to ask, her voice steadier than she felt. The child's smile widened unnaturally, stretching too far across her small face. What we've always wanted. Completion. One of the bloodline must fulfill the pact willingly. Thomas promised us a vessel in exchange for his fortune. Charlotte tried to cheat us. For 50 years, we've waited for another chance. Don't listen, Cassandra warned, moving to stand beside Eleanor. It speaks half-truths wrapped in lies. The child's form flickered again, features shifting into a grotesque approximation of Cassandra's own face. The medium knows, it said in a mocking version of Cassandra's voice. She can hear us whispering. She knows what waits on the other side. Cassandra paled but held her ground. I know you cannot cross without invitation. Without a willing Ravenwood. Vincent stepped forward, positioning himself between Eleanor and the entity. Enough. You have no power here until midnight. Return to the shadows. The thing wearing a child's form turned its attention to Vincent, its expression changing to one of cruel amusement. Faithful caretaker. Did you tell her your real connection to this place? How Thomas Ravenwood was your great-great-grandfather too? How your branch of the family has served as guardians while the main line ran and hid? Eleanor looked at Vincent in shock. You're related to me? Distantly, Vincent admitted, not taking his eyes off the entity. The caretakers have always been from a secondary line. Those with enough of the blood to sense the manor's needs, but not enough to satisfy them. The grandfather clock chimed again, a single ominous toll. 11:30. The child thing smiled once more, then backed toward the doorway. Half an hour until the veil falls completely. Choose wisely, Eleanor Ravenwood. Complete the pact and gain everything your ancestor was promised, power beyond mortal understanding. Or watch as we take what we need anyway. It paused at the threshold, eyes darkening to bottomless pits. We're very hungry after 50 years of waiting. The figure dissolved into shadow, leaving only wet footprints as evidence it had ever been there. In the silence that followed, Eleanor found her voice. I need the truth. All of it. What happens if this pact isn't fulfilled? Dr. Morrow and Winifred exchanged uneasy glances. Vincent sighed heavily. Based on family records and what happened in 1973, Vincent explained reluctantly, they'll take 13 souls before returning to dormancy for another 50 years. Those researchers weren't the first to die here, merely the most public casualties. And if I complete the pact, become this vessel, you would remain physically here, Cassandra said softly, but your essence would serve as an anchor, allowing them partial access to our world through you. You would gain certain powers, certain knowledge, the same gifts that built the Ravenwood fortune, but at the cost of your humanity. Eleanor felt sick. So either 13 innocent people die tonight, or I sacrifice myself to become some kind of supernatural doorway. There is a third option, Winifred said, pulling a yellowed envelope from inside one of her history books. Charlotte's final letter to her daughter, smuggled out after their escape. I've kept it safe all these years, waiting for the right Ravenwood to return. Eleanor took the envelope with trembling hands. The wax seal had been broken long ago, but the letter inside remained intact, written in the same handwriting as the journal. My dearest Josephine. If you are reading this, I have failed to close the door completely. The hunger beneath Ravenwood Manor cannot be destroyed by conventional means, it existed before humanity walked these lands and will exist long after we are dust. But it can be contained, sealed away where it can do no harm. The ritual requires blood freely given at the center of the spiral, not as surrender but as command. Not a vessel but a jailer. The words are encoded in the family Bible, hidden in the third brick from the bottom of the library fireplace. If you must return to Ravenwood, remember, they cannot take what is not offered. They cannot keep what is not surrendered. The blood that opened the door can lock it, but only with perfect understanding of what you face. With all my love and deepest regrets. Your mother, Charlotte. The library fireplace, Eleanor whispered. We need to get to the Bible. It's too dangerous, Vincent objected. The entities are strongest in the library, that's where Thomas performed the original ritual. It's our only chance, Eleanor insisted. I'm not sacrificing myself or letting 13 people die if there's another option. The clock chimed again. 11:45. 15 minutes, Dr. Morrow said grimly. The protective barriers are already failing. He pointed to the chalk symbols, which were slowly fading as if being erased by invisible hands. Eleanor made her decision. I'm going to the library. Who's coming with me? To her surprise, all four rose to stand beside her. Vincent produced an ornate iron key from his pocket. The master key. It will open any door in the manor, he explained, pressing it into her palm. The Ravenwood blood gives you authority here, more than I have as caretaker. Whatever happens, remember what Charlotte wrote, they cannot take what is not offered. The journey from the drawing room to the library should have taken 30 seconds. Instead, the corridor stretched impossibly before them, doors appearing and disappearing along the walls, windows showing different views of the grounds, sometimes moonlit gardens, sometimes dense forest, sometimes nothing but impenetrable darkness. Whispers followed them, childish voices calling Eleanor's name, promising secrets, power, understanding beyond human comprehension. Cold spots moved through the hallway like living things, brushing against them with deliberate malice. When they finally reached the library doors, they found them sealed shut despite Vincent's key. Dr. Morrow examined the wood, which had darkened and appeared to be bleeding sap from between the panels. They know what we're trying to do, he said grimly. Eleanor placed her hand against the door. The wood felt warm, almost feverish beneath her palm. Something inside her, something that had been awakening since she first set foot in Ravenwood Manor, responded to that unnatural heat. The Ravenwood blood. The key to everything. Open, she commanded, surprising herself with the authority in her voice. I am Eleanor Ravenwood, and this house is mine by blood and birthright. The doors shuddered, then swung inward with a groan of protest. The library beyond was transformed, books levitated from shelves, pages fluttering like the wings of trapped birds. The fireplace roared with flames that burned emerald green, casting sickly light across the room. And standing before it was a figure Eleanor recognized from the portrait in the entrance hall, Thomas Ravenwood himself, his 19th-century finery immaculate, his beard neatly trimmed, his eyes reflecting the unnatural fire. My descendant returns, he said, his voice resonating with unnatural harmonics. Have you come to claim your inheritance? Eleanor stepped forward, aware of the others hanging back at the threshold. This confrontation was for Ravenwood blood alone. I've come to end what you started, she replied, clutching Charlotte's letter tightly. Thomas smiled, the expression cold and calculating. Impossible. The pact cannot be broken, only fulfilled. I traded a vessel of my bloodline for wealth and power beyond imagining. The terms were specific: when the veil thins completely, one of my blood must serve as conduit or 13 souls forfeit. My grandmother found another way. Charlotte was weak, Thomas spat, his form flickering momentarily to reveal something else behind the human facade, something composed of shadow and hunger. She thought love could protect her children. She was wrong. The clock began to toll midnight, each chime resonating through the manor like physical force. Eleanor counted, 1, 2, 3. The third brick, she murmured, moving toward the fireplace despite the heat of the supernatural flames. From the bottom. Thomas moved to block her, but when he tried to touch her, his hand passed through her arm like smoke. You cannot change what is written in blood, he raged, his form becoming less substantial with each passing second. 4, 5, 6. Eleanor reached the fireplace, the green flames parting before her as if reluctant to touch her skin. She knelt, counting bricks, finding the third one loose in its mortar. 7, 8, 9. With trembling fingers, she pried it free, revealing a small cavity behind. Inside lay a small leather-bound Bible, its cover stained with what could only be blood. 10, 11, 12. She opened it to find pages where words had been circled seemingly at random, forming a message when read in sequence: blood freely given. Not in surrender but in command. Speak your true name at the heart of the spiral as the veil thins completely. Thomas's form lunged at her, passing through her body like ice water. No, he howled, his voice no longer human. The hunger must be fed. 13. The 13th chime echoed longer than the others, reverberating through Eleanor's bones. The floor beneath her feet cracked along invisible lines, revealing a perfect spiral pattern etched into the foundation of the house. Eleanor understood suddenly, with perfect clarity. The heart of the spiral wasn't in the cellar or beneath the foundation, it was here, in the library, where Thomas had first made his unholy bargain. Where Charlotte had tried and failed to close the door. Where Eleanor now stood, the last of the bloodline, with a choice to make. Vincent and the others remained frozen at the doorway, unable to cross the threshold as reality itself seemed to warp within the library. The green flames rose higher, books crashed to the floor, and the very air thickened like syrup. From every shadow, childlike forms began to emerge, not human children, but things that had never been human, wearing the appearance of innocence like ill-fitting masks. They circled Eleanor, their movements too fluid, too synchronized to be natural. Choose, they whispered in unison. Vessel or sacrifice. There is no third option. Eleanor felt something warm against her chest, the locket Vincent had given her, which she'd slipped into her pocket. She pulled it out, opening it to see the face so similar to her own. Charlotte had found a way. Not to destroy the hunger, but to contain it. Blood freely given, she whispered, understanding at last. She pressed her thumb against the edge of a page, drawing blood. Not much, just a drop that fell onto the spiral beneath her feet. Not surrender, but command. I am Eleanor Josephine Blackwood, she declared, reclaiming the name she'd always known, rejecting the Ravenwood legacy of blood pacts and sacrifice. And I bind you to your prison for another 50 years. The childlike figures shrieked, their forms elongating into writhing shadows. Thomas Ravenwood's image dissolved entirely, revealing the true entity behind the mask, a churning void of hunger that had existed since before human memory. This changes nothing, the voices hissed from every corner. In 50 years, another will come. The blood always returns to Ravenwood. Perhaps, Eleanor acknowledged, standing her ground as the room shook around her. But it won't be my blood. The line ends with me. She pressed her bleeding thumb to Charlotte's letter, completing the circuit her grandmother had begun a century earlier. The spiral beneath her feet glowed briefly, then the light collapsed inward like water down a drain. The inhuman presences that had filled the library were pulled with it, their screams fading to silence. The green flames died. The book settled. The manor itself seemed to exhale, tension releasing from its very foundations. In the sudden, ordinary quiet, Eleanor heard the grandfather clock strike 1, a single, normal chime. When she looked back at the doorway, Vincent and the others stood watching her with expressions ranging from awe to relief. It's done, Cassandra confirmed, her eyes clear again. The veil has closed. They sleep once more. Dr. Morrow rushed forward, scientific curiosity overcoming caution. Extraordinary. You've essentially reset the cycle. Created a holding pattern using the same principles Charlotte attempted, but with the full understanding that was missing from her attempt. Not reset, Eleanor corrected, sudden exhaustion making her legs weak. Ended. At least for my family. Vincent helped her to a chair, his face solemn. The Ravenwood Trust will continue to guard this place. To prepare for what might come in 50 years. It won't be my concern, Eleanor said firmly. After tonight, I'm Eleanor Blackwood. Nothing more, nothing less. As dawn broke over Ravenwood Manor, Eleanor stood on the stone steps watching the sun illuminate the ancient forest. The house behind her felt different, not cleansed, exactly, but contained. The hunger still slept beneath its foundations, but the door was locked for another generation. Winifred approached, carrying a small box. Charlotte's journal and letter. They belong to you now. Eleanor considered the box, then gently pushed it back toward the historian. No. They belong in your archives, with the truth about Ravenwood Manor. It's time people knew what happened here. The trust won't allow it, Vincent warned, joining them on the steps. The trust doesn't control me, Eleanor replied. I'm a journalist, remember? And I have quite a story to tell. Dr. Morrow and Cassandra emerged from the manor, carrying Eleanor's overnight bag. The black car that had brought her waited at the bottom of the steps, engine idling. What will you write? Cassandra asked. Eleanor smiled, feeling lighter than she had since receiving that cream envelope with its raven seal. The truth. That some legacies are meant to be broken, not continued. That the past only has the power we give it. As the car pulled away from Ravenwood Manor, Eleanor watched the Gothic spires recede in the rear window. For a moment, just a moment, she thought she saw a small figure in white standing at an upper window, raising a hand in farewell. Eleanor didn't wave back. Some doors were meant to stay closed. Some stories were meant to end. She opened her notebook and began to write.